morning. I'm Margie O'Driscoll, and on behalf of the Center for Innovation's Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. The mission of the center is to catalyze innovation in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry for a better tomorrow for all people. So we thank you for joining us today. We would also like to take a moment to express our gratitude to the many sponsors who make our work possible. We wouldn't be here today without your support. Thank you. CFI would also not be remiss not to share a bit about our ongoing work with Ukrainian leaders as they rebuild during war and plan for comprehensive reconstruction. As you may know, 3 CFI leaders participated in a groundbreaking conference in Kyiv in July. This conference was led by Ukrainians. Our follow-up to that conference was to invite 10 Ukrainians to the San Francisco Bay Area in January to learn about advanced means and methods of construction, including robotics, industrialized construction, and the use of AI. Plans are well underway for this visit, for this group, which includes Ukrainian mayors, members of parliament, leaders from UNESCO, and NGO leaders. We welcome the participation of you, our community of innovators, in this important opportunity to share our best ideas and to support what is certain to be one of the largest opportunities for global innovation since World War II. This morning, the Center for Innovation is pleased to host a conversation with Nate Fuller. Before I introduce Nate, a word about our webinar protocols. We are recording this session and will place it on our website, centerforinnovation.org, and YouTube in the coming days. Our webinars are now available as podcasts, so please check them out wherever you download your favorite podcasts. We welcome your comments and questions, so please use the chat box to share them. Here's a bit of information about Nate. Nate is a passionate and accomplished construction technology leader with a diverse background in corporate innovation, construction technology, and entrepreneurship. He founded Placer Solutions, a management consultancy, in 2021. Although I've been introduced to Nate several times over the years, the idea of this webinar came about when I spoke to the innovation leader at Gilbane. She told me that the report that Nate is going to share with you today was the single best study she had ever read about AI. So you're in for a treat today. The most recent report explores text-based AI tools like OpenAI's advanced language model, emphasizing real-world applications and challenges. The report addresses the pressing questions of construction business leaders and provides a roadmap for IT leaders. Nate, we are so delighted to have you join us. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Margie. Also, thank you, Kelly at Gilbane. I didn't know that was the intro to this presentation, so I appreciate the shout out if she's listening. Also, I will say it's Placer Solution. I appreciate the Placer, which is the original pronunciation, but I had enough people say Placer that I'm just going to roll with it. So Placer Solutions. And yeah, as Margie said, I'm the founder of Placer Solutions. I founded the company as a management consultant company several years ago, really to work with construction technology leaders around the industry in terms of tech adoption and best practices for new technologies. So I've spent my career in construction. I know Margie likes for folks to give a little bit of background on their journey. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about kind of my upbringing through the industry. I graduated with a degree in civil engineering and made the mistake of joining Bechtel right out of college. And I say that half-heartedly because it wasn't a mistake at all. It was actually pretty amazing. I had the opportunity to really kind of travel all over the world on these big Bechtel projects, and spent the majority of my 20s on construction sites. So living and breathing construction. Just a couple here. Papua New Guinea was one of my first projects. We were looking at a gold mine in West Sepik, and we were trying to figure out how to actually build a mine in the middle of the jungle. And so that's how I got my feet wet. And from there, went on to work in Australia on some pretty large greenfield mining projects, and ended up back in the States around 2014, and was essentially a civil engineer, geotechnical engineer based out of the San Francisco office. And kind of, when a project needed help or assistance, they would call us up and excuse me, we would go out to the site and help solve problems with the project management and construction management teams. And so that role really took me to a lot of other places internationally, including Saudi Arabia. We worked on the Riyadh Metro project. We did some work in the UAE on some alumina smelters, and in British Columbia on some LNG terminals. Obviously, a lot of other projects in between. We did work in the Gulf Coast. We did work with nuclear at the Savannah River project, and also at the Hanford site up in Washington. So really, you know, it was an amazing experience working at Bechtel. I spent the majority of my early career there, and it was just an amazing experience. So, you know, as I mentioned, ended up in San Francisco area around 2014. By 2015, 2016, if folks remember, there was just a lot of these new emerging technologies swirling around. And so it was at that time that Bren Bechtel and the senior leadership within the Bechtel organization decided to put together an Office of Innovation, and so had the opportunity to help build that office out. And it was a small team. There were 4 or 5 of us in the early days, but we built the Office of Innovation at Bechtel at a time when there really wasn't a lot of good information on how to do construction innovation or construction technology in the way that we do it today. And so a lot of it was kind of learning as we went along, and understanding not just the tech landscape, but I think what's really important, and what I think drives a lot of the work that I do now, is understanding the organizational landscape and the industry landscape and the challenges, because I think folks on the call here who come from the industry can appreciate that construction has a lot of really kind of core challenges that make it different from other industries, and is a big part of why I see, you know, technology lacking in a lot of ways. But we've made a lot of progress over the years. And so I've since leaving Bechtel, I took a detour. I started my own construction tech company, and ran that for about 1.5 years, before venturing out into the consulting world. And the thing I like to say is that, you know, if technology was the problem, you know, we have these supercomputers in our pockets. So it's not the technology, I think, in a lot of ways that makes construction kind of lag behind in tech adoption. I think in a lot of ways it's the way that construction companies approach technology and the way the industry is structured. So that brings me to, I guess, what we're talking about today. In addition to the management consulting work that I do, I've started this parallel track of really in-depth research reports on emerging technology topics in construction that help to fill what I see as a pretty prevalent information void across the industry. And this goes all the way back to, you know, the early days of the Office of Innovation at Bechtel, where there just wasn't a lot of good quality information. There was really no quality information because there just wasn't a lot of construction tech stuff out there. And what we saw, and what we still see today, is a lot of marketing hype. You know, we see a lot of marketing hype. We see a lot of sponsored bias. We see a lot of regurgitated content on construction technology that is so devoid of best practices and actionable information to almost make it meaningless. And so I decided this year to finally do something about that, and have begun, through Placer Solutions, putting together these research reports in collaboration with other folks out in the industry as well. So I should give credit here. Erin Kahn was a participant in this research report as well, and she helped put it together. And what we put together was, excuse me, a real, you know, soup to nuts analysis of this topic, which is text-based artificial intelligence in construction. And the idea here is to really cast a very wide net across the industry. We tried to highlight at least 2 builders in the report. We interviewed and surveyed over 100 construction professionals and technology providers to help inform the report. And then we underpin it with our own industry native expertise to put together something that I'm very proud of, and that it sounds like folks in the industry are getting a lot of value out of as well. So the thing I'll say here is that we're going to talk very high level. Some of the key takeaways from the report we'll touch on, but I would encourage folks, please check out the report. These are a labor of love. They take a lot of time to put together, and so we do sell them, and I would appreciate any support out there. So again, high level, what we'll discuss today is the idea of text-based AI and what that refers to. And just to be clear from the get-go, when I say text-based AI, I'm discerning that from, say, something like vision-based AI. And text-based AI more refers to what we see, kind of what what came out with ChatGPT, which are these really amazing large language models and natural language processing techniques that allow us to interact with computers in a way that wasn't even imaginable 5 years ago. And so we'll kind of briefly go over what a large language model is. I'm not going to get too in the weeds on it. We're just going to kind of briefly explain it. We'll then discuss the two builders who took part in the report. So I need to shout out Haskell and Barton Mallow, agreed to be spotlighted in this report, and you'll see why I think that their involvement was super relevant and important to what we ended up putting together. And then I think one of the best things that came out of this report was a use case prioritization matrix, and we'll briefly go over that. And the idea there is that there's just a lot of hot takes on social media about AI and large language models, and this use case prioritization is really just to kind of cut through that noise and get builders at least thinking about how to begin putting together a roadmap. So just to kind of tee up the theme of the research report, a little bit of a vibe check here. The general sentiment that we saw across all of the interviews and all the surveys was that there is this balance between fear and anxiety and optimism in the industry around this technology. And I think the fear comes from the fear of being left behind, right? I think a lot of construction companies feel like they were caught flat-footed by this technology and they don't quite know what to do with it. And they're worried that their competitors are moving faster than they are. And then on the other side of it, there's a lot of optimism. And I think the optimism, honestly, mostly comes from the folks in the field. This was really one of the first technologies that had that bottom-up feel to it. And, having talked to a number of project engineers and project managers and superintendents out in the field who are using these tools, they're optimistic about it. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it's helping them do their work better and more efficiently, and they're good with that. But the research report, I think, in a nutshell, what we accomplished was the ability to kind of resolve that tension at both the field level and the executive level in terms of what this technology means. Very briefly here, I just want to start by saying that there is nothing magical about large language models. So the theory and the concepts behind them have been around for at least 100 years, close to 100 years. What's really changed in the past 5 to 10 years is just the amount of computational power that's available to churn through what amounts to essentially petabytes of internet scale data. And so I think Microsoft's investment in OpenAI is a testament to that. A lot of that investment wasn't actually a cash investment. It was an investment in Azure credits for OpenAI to train their models, because these models cost millions, if not tens of millions of dollars to train. So I just wanted to flash this on the screen. It's an image that shows a number of parameters, which is a long-winded way of saying the size of the large language model versus over time. And you can see it's got this hockey stick nature to it. And that hockey stick that inflection point was honestly on account of just distributed cloud computing. The other thing, kind of teeing off that not magic theme, is that the output on these large language models is really probability based. And so the model has honestly no idea what it is saying, but it's able to pick apart the nuance and the context of words in a sentence and then probabilistically essentially guess what it thinks you want to hear. And this chart, I think, does an awesome job of demonstrating this. So on the bottom of the chart are sentences with the word crane in it. And at the top of the chart are also sentences with the word crane in it. The difference is that the model sees the word crane on the top as being an animal, whereas the crane on the bottom is a piece of equipment, as folks in construction would know. So the thing here is that it's never 100% sure what it is. It's never 100% sure that it's an animal or a piece of equipment. But there's this band in the middle where it's like pretty unsure. Like it has kind of, based on the context of all of the surrounding words and information, it doesn't quite know what it is. And that's where these large language models start to get into trouble. And so one of the big takeaways from this report was a survey that went around that asked folks what they saw as the risks of using large language models like ChatGPT in day-to-day business operations. And the number one concern from folks in construction was this ability to create inaccurate content. And again, it goes back to that red band in the middle. Is it a piece of equipment? Is it a bird? I don't know. And so if it doesn't know, it has to give a response. And so it'll just make something up. And that's where we run into this idea of hallucinations, also known as plausible sounding fabrications. But because it's conversant, it can elicit people to also divulge more information than they might want to. And that information can be sensitive. And so that's the second big concern that came out of our research, was the concern about privacy and data security on sensitive projects. So just kind of keep those two top of mind, because the use cases that we dive into are going to look at that. And we'll start with Haskell. And Haskell's use case was really interesting because I refer to it as just a world-class, a master class in terms of governance and policy around these large language models. Essentially, and Mark Trednick is the one that kind of opened my eyes to this. You know, he's a CIO of Haskell. He said there's really nothing new about the challenges associated with these large language models. He says, you know, Google and social media have been around for over a decade, and we tell our employees not to put sensitive project information out there on the internet. So why not just update our governance policy, update our internet usage policy to reflect this new piece of software, which happens to be a large language model that can put information out on the web publicly. And so, you know, updating their internet usage policy was kind of step one, but they went a couple of steps further and took a very nuanced approach. So they began to communicate the risks and opportunities to employees, right? So an educational campaign to really allow employees to understand what the issues with the large language models were. And so it's not just this policy coming down from a high, it was a lot of working with their employees to understand why that was necessary. And then the last piece of it, the third leg of the stool, so to speak, is that they created an AI coordination group to help steer the roadmap direction of AI in the organization. They saw this as moving so quickly, they needed to quickly muster a group together that's cross-functional, cross-organizational, to help steer that roadmap. So yeah, I give Haskell a lot of credit for what they did. Certain companies locked everything down. Other companies, probably the majority of companies, have done nothing, to be honest. But something needs to be done. And maybe there's a middle road there, this measured AI policy that Haskell took. The second use case here is really exciting because it dives into actual use cases and applications of these large language model tools across the industry. And Barton Mallow was awesome, a great participant in this research report. We interviewed half a dozen to a dozen project engineers, project managers, and other folks around the organization to understand how they're actually using these tools today. And just because this tech is moving so quickly, it's important to timestamp this. I believe the conversations were in June, July, so mid 2023. But already then, you know, ChatGPT hadn't been out for, you know, maybe 6 to 8 months at that point. Folks were already using it in really creative and novel ways that we'll get into. The first is a project engineer in the Colorado area who was using, I think he used Bing Chat as what he called an enhanced control F. So he was in a position where he had to review and respond to design comments from the regulatory authorities. And what he would do, and he also needed to reconcile different code standards. So the project was using AISC and the reviewers were using American Welding Society. And so he didn't know both of them, but he was able to quickly identify where in the code certain responses could come from using Bing Chat to point him in the right direction. And so he didn't use it to give the response, but he used it to quickly get up to speed on something that he didn't have a ton of prior knowledge about, and then take it to the next level and actually complete the task by going through and reviewing information that Bing Chat provided. So that was one of them. Another one that I think is really interesting and pretty crazy when you start to wrap your mind around it is a project manager in Michigan who used ChatGPT to put together DAX measures. So folks are familiar with DAX. It's a Power BI, essentially programming language. And he did not know how to code in DAX, and he was able to use DAX. He was able to use ChatGPT to put together DAX measures that sorted Autodesk information and was able to pivot it to a number of diverse stakeholders. And so I think this was an amazing application of this this tool, these large language model tools, because first of all, he's not putting proprietary information into public tools. So it's not like he was taking all of the project information and putting it into ChatGPT. He was just using ChatGPT to use a tool that was already implemented in the business and make it better. And the second one is obviously he had no experience with DAX. So, we talk about upskilling and training in the industry. This is really kind of a godsend in a lot of ways. Another theme that came out of the research was just how interesting it is to see where the B2B AI space is headed. And I highlight Microsoft here because Microsoft in a lot of ways is kind of the only show in town when it comes to enterprise level B2B AI services. I have no skin in the game. Again, all of the research that we do is unsponsored. So I'm not vouching for Microsoft here. But again, they're kind of the only show in town, and they put together a platform that allows you through Azure to leverage the OpenAI large language models on their secure instances. So take ChatGPT and all of the security and privacy concerns, and then move it into the service level agreement with Microsoft, and you essentially have Azure OpenAI services. So it solves a pretty big problem and a pretty big risk, as if we go back to a couple slides, which was this privacy and data security piece. What's really interesting as well with Azure OpenAI services, it's not intuitive in a lot of ways. You still need IT support to at least set up an instance, but you can also dial up the complexity to a degree that allows you to build a lot of stuff in-house, and you can really differentiate yourself as a construction company by using tools like this. So I just wanted to highlight this for some of those builders who might be a little more ambitious in their goals, that the tools exist for them to essentially build in-house custom applications around different use cases. So the last thing we'll chat about here is the use case prioritization work that we did in the research report. And so what we did was we rigorously went through 45 different construction activities, and we ranked each activity across 9 distinct areas. What we did, we measured the level of impact that we thought the use case would have on companies' day-to-day operations. And then we also measured the level of effort required to actually implement it to its fullest extent possible. And so the effort, again, going back to one slide, to the Microsoft slide, maybe some of that complexity there, right, would fall into things like technical considerations. There's also business alignment. So understanding which use cases to tackle first, second, third. You have to get alignment with the business and make sure that you're doing things properly. Data management's a big one in construction. So there's just we're still digitizing, and we're moving forward there. A couple other security considerations: organizational factors in construction, project-based, field-based work, people moving constantly is a pretty main challenge. And then there's things like financial considerations. So we did this across, and we ranked each use case across all 45 use cases across these 9 distinct areas. And we were able to put together this broad spectrum of use cases in construction that could be a starting point for a construction organization to begin tackling different parts of their field operations. I want to say this is, I would not recommend taking this verbatim and going out and building a roadmap. It's really meant to get the conversation started within the organization. And so we include it in the report to get the conversation started, and we explain how that conversation should evolve. But it's at least a starting point. And again, it kind of cuts through all of that social media chatter about large language models, and provides something that's actually tangible that a construction organization can use. So what's interesting, I think what's really interesting about this use case prioritization, and we'll pull a few use cases out here. Something like a toolbox talk, if folks are familiar with kind of the safety meetings at the beginning of a shift. Quick win with ChatGPT. I mean, you still need the safety manager to kind of review things before going out and distributing it. But I mean, ChatGPT can knock a toolbox talk out of the park. Something that's maybe a much bigger impact on the organization and could potentially open new business capabilities, but that's also a major undertaking, is something like bid proposals. And so this is a use case that requires a high degree of technical considerations. There's a lot of data management and customized tuning. There's data silos across the organization that need to be integrated in a way that that would allow us to put together bids and essentially automate bid generations. So yeah, one that's a little bit further out there on the roadmap, but potentially much more transformative. And a construction company could begin chipping away at that and putting together steps along the way to get to where they need to be. So again, this is a first pass at a roadmap for AI implementation for a typical construction company. It's obviously worth noting construction is not monolithic. There's a lot of different sectors out there. So, what works for a general building contractor is going to look very different for a heavy civil contractor. But hopefully this is useful. And again, folks can check out the QR code. There's a lot more in the report that dives into the justification and kind of the next steps of this in the report. Yeah, and finally, we'll just kind of close on this. The high level 30,000 foot takeaways in terms of best practices for construction. On the individual level, the key takeaway is that, again, this is a tool that just augments human expertise. It doesn't replace it. And I like the way I frame it in my mind is that we're transitioning from knowledge workers to knowledgeable workers. And what that means is knowledge has been somewhat democratized by these large language model tools, but the knowledgeable worker knows how to leverage that knowledge in a way with diverse stakeholders and people. And if there's anything true about construction projects, it's that stakeholder management is kind of the name of the game. And so these knowledgeable workers are going to actually become more important, I think, as the years go on. They'll be leveraging tools like large language models, but they still need to be human and understand humans and understand how projects operate in order to leverage that information better. On the firm side, I honestly, I would point to Haskell. I think that their governance strategy and their communication strategy is world class, but it's important to outline clear protocols and set up educational initiatives to make sure that employees are informed on what these tools can do. And then on the industry side, yeah, it's a lot of it's sharing information and working together to understand this technology and how to best apply it across the industry. So thanks for the opportunity to present. I'll hand it back to Margie.
Nate, this was so great. To those of you in the audience, we welcome your questions, either in the Q&A box or in the chat. I have a couple of questions for Nate. One of the first ones comes from some conversations I've had with innovation directors at different construction firms around the world, which is trying to figure out how they help their companies determine their company's actual AIA technical competency to start moving into AI models. And as a management consultant, I'm sure you have some general thoughts about how you begin to even determine whether your company's up for this.
Yeah, so you're referring to kind of the technical considerations. I mean, I think what you're referring to there is a lot of the data management are the pieces in place for us to even begin leveraging these tools. Is that the concern?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that is there's certainly companies that are ahead and there's companies that are behind. I think if there's any anxiety, that's probably where a lot of it's coming from. I don't know that the gap is that large though. I mean, honestly, I think through our research, we found that a lot of companies are using productivity tools like, Microsoft and their whole Office suite. They're using Procore. So in a lot of ways, they've offloaded that data management and that digitization piece to third-party vendors. But the important thing is that you take stock of it. And just go back a couple of slides here. These are the these are the pieces that are kind of roadblocks to implementation, so to speak. But I think, and there's a few key points here. The other one is, in addition to data management, is just understanding where the data sits in the organization. And this is really challenging in construction, and it's especially challenging given the nature of the industry, because it is project-based, it's field-based. People on projects are constantly moving around. I have a piece of my consulting work that's literally just mapping out how people are connected around a construction organization, and then using that from a change management perspective. But that shadow IT piece is really important, because those folks on project in the field, a lot of times are just using tools that aren't approved. And it just makes that technical infrastructure a lot more difficult to entangle. So we could go, I mean, we could go piece by piece through each of these 6 different areas. But I think these, again, I point to the research report if folks are more interested, go check it out. But these are kind of at a high level the six areas to address in terms of understanding your level of competency to start making the leap.
Great. We have a question here from Nick Tournes. Nick's asking, how do you see AI impacting building design and engineering in the near and midterm? And I have a whole bunch of specific sub questions for you about that. I was going to do a round robin, a real quick, when do we think we'll see X, Y, or Z? But for the time being, you want to take that from 10,000 feet, Nate?
Yeah. There's some interesting startups out there that are looking at things like generative AI in design. There's startups, and there's also some of the big players. I just got back from Autodesk University, so there was a lot of that there. The pre-construction piece is really interesting, because I think a lot of that is knowledge work, to be honest. And I'm coming at this from as an engineer, so I have some skin in the game as far as my early training. There's a lot of work we do in engineering that's in a spreadsheet, that we probably bill a ton for, and that could be automated pretty quickly. I don't know that AI is necessarily the tool to do that. As far as the design goes, and architecture and engineering, a lot of the generative AI tools I think are really interesting. There's a company called Augmenta that looks at that routing of conduit, and I think they're moving into mechanical, electrical, plumbing, kind of working down the acronyms. But essentially looking at how to optimize layout for those systems. So some of that stuff is kind of on the way. I mean, in terms of, Margie, you wanted a time frame?
Well, I'm
put
not
me
sure
on
how
the
to
spot.
define near and midterm. I guess that's
I think, yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
way to frame it. I think near term there are going to be some serious efficiency gains with things like large language models. Just point to the project engineer in Colorado, right? Being able to interpret that code. He put a number on it, and he said it was like, this would have taken me 3 hours, and it took me 10 minutes, right? So that's near term. This is like kind of on the periphery pieces. I think longer term, it's more of the meaty stuff about like actually automating design in a way that I don't think it's going to put engineers out of business, but it's going to dramatically improve efficiency. And there's always going to be a need for that knowledgeable worker to make sure that the design is what it's intended to be. It's what the client wants. It's what the customer wants. It's constructible, coordination with the builders. So there's a lot of pieces there that aren't automatable, I guess would be my answer.
We have a question here from Bruce Cousins. I tried your QR code and it didn't connect. How can we purchase the report? Maybe you want to put this in the chat box, and then how much is it? So
yeah, I can drop it in the chat box here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So the report is are sold through licenses. There's an individual license and there is a team license. Individual license is self-explanatory. The team license gets you you can share it with 10 people within your organization. Folks can check it out. I just dropped it in the chat. Feel free to download the sample report. It'll give you kind of a taste of what's in there. Yeah, thanks for reminding me to drop the link in here.
Great. And how much are the licenses? That was the other part of Bruce's question.
So the individual license is $500, and the team license, I believe, is $1,250.
Yeah, that's given the possible cost savings for any company, it sounds like a very small investment in the report. We have a question here from Brian Anderson. Do you have any good resources on how innovation departments are structured within construction? Is that the kind of work that your firm does, I guess?
That is actually a lot of the work that I do. I don't know that I have anything. Are you referring to like something we could point folks to? I don't know that there's anything in writing. I'd be happy to jump on a call and kind of discuss with you. I think it's a big challenge in the industry. I think the industry hasn't quite settled on what it means to do technology or innovation. There's a lot. It's like a alphabet soup of terms, right? We have we have emerging tech groups, we have innovation groups, we have field solutions groups, we have virtual design and construction. A lot of them are doing similar things. And I don't know that the industry has settled on a common language of even how to structure this from a functional level. But I think there's some best practices out there. There's some common themes across all of them. And I like to say, I think the biggest thing that these groups should be doing, and well, I'm going to put VDC in its own bucket because I think VDC serves a specific function that's somewhat distinct from like innovation and emerging tech. But if you look at innovation and emerging tech, the best practice I've seen is that you are not the gatekeeper for technology in the organization. You are the air traffic controller. So your job is to find what I call internal market fit, right? So you have all the startups out there that are looking to find product market fit. Your job is to find internal market fit within the organization. And so in order to do that, you need to know who the people are in your company and how to steer different technologies around the organization. And that's easier said than done. So if you want more information, let's talk.
One of the things that we hear a lot about at the Center for Innovation, because we work with many of the people who hold the title or responsibility of innovation leaders, is the need for them to understand what the problems are in the field and at all levels of the organization, so they can help inspire, all those who are trying to provide solutions to actually move in that direction. One of the big challenges in innovation was really met in one of the first webinars that CFI did, which is a conversation with someone named Henrik Bennigsen, who started a company called Canvas, which many of you will know now is a very successful company doing drywall via robotics. So Henrik, we said, well, so what made you think about solving a drywall problem? And he said, oh, I wasn't solving a drywall problem. I wanted to create a robot. And so I created this robot, but then I didn't know how the robot could solve a problem for the world. And he literally was at a bar, guy sitting next to him was not who he was waiting for, struck up a conversation with this guy in construction. And Henrik just described what he did. And the guy said, you know what, that'd be great for drywall. And Henrik said, what's drywall? I don't even know. And so often we find these solutions from other places, which we're trying to figure out how to bring in to the design and construction industry. And likewise, those innovation directors are trying to ascertain what are the problems we're trying to actually solve so that they can make those connections often with the technology resources which are out there. So
yeah, I think I know Henrik, and I actually visited their makerspace before they were Canvas. I think
yeah.
Nubotics was the name of the company, and he had the big floppy arm with the air in it.
In the mission, yeah.
I mean, I think that points to something that's another big challenge in the industry, is just bringing technology folks into the industry is really challenging because it is an opaque industry, and so it's not a consumer product, right? So a lot of the early tech strategy, early tech concepts, early tech playbooks, they come out of consumer products, right? Like everyone knows the story of Uber and Facebook. I was just watching The Social Network the other night. It's a great movie. Yeah. So, those are consumer products, and construction's very different. And it can be really daunting for all of the smart folks in, Stanford and UC Berkeley and MIT and all over the world who want to make a difference in the industry. It's really challenging to come into it. And so yeah, I mean, Henrik's the exception, not the rule, but hopefully he becomes the rule down the road as more people enter the industry, and also the industry makes it easier for those folks to come and help.
One of the big challenges, I think, for AI are the sort of cultural barriers within organizations. I had a conversation with someone who was presenting to the board of directors of his construction company about the opportunities of AI, and he asked who at the board of directors level had actually played with ChatGPT or anything else, and he said one hand went up, and consequently he heard from so many other people deep reservations, deep concerns, a lot of resistance because people hadn't gotten in there and sort of played within that space. And so as a management consultant, I know you deal with culture a lot. So can you talk a little bit about the impact and possibilities of that within big organizations?
Yeah, well, I think in the context of AI, it's flipped the script in a lot of ways. Because I think innovation folks and technology folks on the call would appreciate, a lot of it feels like we're pushing this technology to the field, whereas this was a technology that just just, it was like wildfire, you know, and folks were using it in a matter of months rather than years. So I think what that points to on the culture side is a couple of things. It points to the fact that folks on projects are willing to use tech. The tech has to work though, right? It has to provide immediate value, and that first time user experience has to be really dialed in, which I think, you know, ChatGPT and Google Bard and Bing Chat had that going for it. But driving culture has changed. I mean, that is the name of the game with change management. So maybe beyond AI, I think culture in construction is driven by leadership, and leaders in these organizations, I hate to say it, need to check out ChatGPT because it's pretty amazing. You know, so maybe that's the first step, is like understand the technology. But yeah, I mean, putting together a strategy and then moving into planning and implementation of how to actually either implement a solution or implement a program for emerging technology in your organization is a first step. And as part of that strategy and planning, there has to be a cultural component. And I call them field influencers. But across your construction organization, there are a handful, if not more, individuals who others identify as being the technology person in the field. And those folks are really hard to find in construction, because a lot of times they're flying under the radar. They're out on a job site, and they're removed from the back office, where a lot of the technology and innovation decision making happens. So you really need to find those field influencers and leverage them to drive that change in the organization. I can't quite recall. I'll end on this. I can't quite recall where I read this stat, but you need somewhere between 5 to 10% of an organization bought into a change management initiative in order for that change management to be successful. And so, you know, within construction, 10% of the organization, most of those folks are in the field. They're out on the projects. And so if you're trying to push a change management initiative in the back office in construction, it's just doomed to fail. So go out in the field and find those field influencers, identify them, profile them, understand what their needs and wants are, and leverage them for your technology programming.
Great. I want to play a little game with you, with your permission. And for the audience, I'll just tell you that Nate already agreed to do this. I'm gonna put out the idea of AI connecting with some of the other things that we know are advanced technologies, and saying, when do we think that we'll actually see a solution? And the objective of this little game is first of all, it's purely hypothetical, because none of us really know what the future will hold. But really to say that some of the concerns about robots taking off the world next week are really not going to happen, because this technology is incredibly complicated, even with the power of cloud computing and so many other things. So Nate has agreed to hypothesize how long it will take to actually see significant integration of these ideas. So the first is AI-enabled BIM for IoT. Now, how's that for a bunch of acronyms?
Oh my
What do you
God.
think?
There's so much going on there. AI empowered BIM for IoT.
Yeah.
Sorry, is it AI powered IoT for BIM, or AI powered BIM for IoT?
AI-enabled BIM for IoT. So in other words, end result is IoT.
Are we doing like years, decades, near term, long term? What's the benchmark here?
I would say number of years. Like, what do you think?
Okay, so fully integrated AI BIM IoT is kind of how I'm reading that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think BIM is more or less there. AI is getting there. I think it's the IoT piece that's a little suspect. I give it 10 years, 15 years, 10 to 15.
Okay. So everyone on this call is thinking, okay, am I still in the industry in 10 or 15 years when I'm going to see this happen? How about an AI chatbot for supply chain?
Well, I mean, that's a year or less. It doesn't already exist.
Okay.
I'm willing to guess it exists somewhere out in the world. Yeah, now.
Okay. How about a holistic health and safety management tool for monitoring worker safety via AI?
So monitoring is tricky. The construction tech company I started was literally safety monitoring on job sites. It's a tough one, but there's a lot of back-end stuff in terms of dashboards and analytics. I mean, a lot of safety is, leading indicators, right? And so, near misses lead to fatalities, kind of thing. So tracking those, if you have those well tracked, I think a lot of those tools, a lot of the backend tools, very near term, if not already in existence. The monitoring piece, so that monitoring piece gets outside of maybe text-based AI and into different forms of AI, but 100% accuracy monitoring safety on job sites. Like I said, I made my bet on that and I was way too early. So maybe I'm not the right person to ask. I would say 5 to 10 years. I do think, my startup was in computer vision and we were being a really ambitious product. It was an edge computer vision device. This was back in 2018. But, I still think there's a place in the industry for like a Google cam, a ring cam for a job site, right? And something that's easy to use, that's out of the box, you put on a job site and it's looking out and seeing if there's any heavy vehicle, light vehicle interactions, people walking in exclusion zones, etc. I give it 5 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. I've been wrong before though.
That's okay. Hey, this is we're all looking in a crystal ball. So, but you have one that's a little more studied and knowledgeable than mine. I'll just say that. How about AI and blockchain?
I'm going to plead the fifth on that.
Okay.
I'm not touching blockchain. Sorry.
How about AI-driven construction contract analysis? It sounds like some of that's already happening with the building.
Oh, that's now. Yeah. And actually, I'll plug a LinkedIn Live event that's coming up. We're going to have the Document Crunch guys on. So folks should go check out the Placer Solutions LinkedIn page and sign up for that LinkedIn Live event. But yeah, Document Crunch for all intents and other startups. Again, I don't have any skin in the game, but they're already solving that issue.
Amazing. Really amazing. What a pleasure to spend this time together with you. I think I'm going to draw our time together to a close and just add a couple of notes. Nate, you've been so much fun. And thank you for taking on this sort of Jimmy Kimmel, like, okay, what do we think? What do we think? A little exercise with us, because I think it does help sort of let people know where we are today and how long it's actually going to take to see some of this massive integration that we're talking about happening. But the report is fantastic. Really encourage the audience to contact Nate and get a copy of it, because I think it will be really transformative for you and your business enterprises. So thank you again, Nate. I want to let the audience know that on December 7th, we'll be having a webinar with Joe Callis, who's an architect and a cultural heritage specialist for UNESCO. He's working on his PhD, and his research combines AI and machine learning with 3D point clouds to expedite structural assessment of historic buildings for enhanced disaster reconnaissance missions. Now, that's what his research is focused on, the problem that his research is focused on solving, but I'm sure that everyone in the audience can imagine how that kind of technology might be useful for the work that you're doing today. He also conducts what we call a feature importance analysis, which is something that engineers know about, that identifies the attributes of unreinforced masonry buildings that increases vulnerability to blast loads, assisting engineers and preservation experts in data-informed retrofits to bolster resilience. I think there's a lot of implications for Joe's research, which are incredible for the design and construction field. So we hope you join us on December 7th. You can find out more information at the centerforinnovation.org's website. This webinar will be on YouTube and on our website early next week. You can also check it out wherever you get your favorite podcast. Special thanks to the amazing April Willoughby for all of her behind the scenes work on all CFI projects. And finally, if you aren't yet a member of our community, please be sure to subscribe to our free newsletter to receive updates on many webinars and other interesting events. Thanks again to our sponsors, and most especially to Nate for his time today. So thank you again.